The Life Sciences DNA podcast is sponsored by Agilesium Labs, a collaborative space where Agilesium works with its clients to co-develop and incubate POCs, products, and solutions. To learn how Agilesium Labs can use the power of its generative AI for life sciences analytics, visit them at labs.agilesium.com. Sri, we've got Vikram Nair on the show today. For listeners who may not be familiar with Vikram, who is he?
Vikram is Senior Vice President of Digital and Data Analytics at Amneal Pharmaceuticals. He's been leading their digital strategy, integrating artificial intelligence, automation, and predictive analytics into everything from manufacturing to R&D operations. He's one of those leaders who bridges technical depth with strategic vision, helping a company modernize without losing focus on patient access and affordability.
And for people not familiar with Amneal, what is it?
Amneal is a US-based pharmaceutical company best known for its generics business, but it's also been expanding into specialty medicines and biosimilars. They've got a strong focus on operational excellence and quality manufacturing, and now they're bringing in digital transformation into that mix. What's especially interesting is how they're applying data science and automation to streamline development and regulatory process, an area that is traditionally moved slowly in big pharma.
And what are you hoping to learn from Vikram today?
Danny, I'm really curious to hear how Amneal is actually implementing AI, but more so, Vikram is a thought leader on driving transformations in a very practical and pragmatic manner. I'd really like to get his insights around how you approach a big transformation like AI. How do you bring change into organizations, and how do you bring the organizations along through the change journey to make sure that AI adoption is happening at scale?
Well, before we begin, I want to remind our audience that they can stay up on the latest episodes of Life Sciences DNA by hitting the subscribe button. If you enjoy the content, be sure to hit the like button and let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to listen to us on the go by downloading an audio-only version of the show from your preferred podcast platform. With that, let's welcome Vikram to the show.
Vikram, welcome to Life Sciences DNA. It's wonderful to have you here. Vikram, you've gone through several different transformations. Maybe it'll be great to give the audience a little perspective on some of the journey before you got to your current role at Amneal.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk to you. We met back when I was at Pfizer, and maybe it's just me, but every engagement I've had seems to have this transformational aspect to it. We're always trying to do something that's first of a kind that has not been done before, and I'm really thankful for those experiences because I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about change and about how to drive change, how to correct change that's not going in the right direction. So the various elements of this I can think about is first at Pfizer, I was probably one of the team that was bringing in the first time electronic data collection for clinical trials was being done. Everybody knew the idea and the concept, but nobody knew what we needed to do to actually make it happen. Another time that I can recall that was very, very memorable for me was at Carnival Cruise Lines, where we were introducing a guest experience platform that would transform the customer experience on a cruise ship. Again, something that had never been thought about. But if you think about the Disney Magic Band on a ship, that's really what it was. And it had so many different components that had to come together to make a medallion and a mobile app work, to find your way around the ship, to order food and have it delivered, to having social media contact. It was just incredible. And just the opportunity to have been part of that team and have some role in bringing it was one of the most memorable experiences I've had. And I'm probably forgetting a few, but those two stood out as kind of the beginning and probably the last big one.
Absolutely. And as you came into Amneal, the world is changing in terms of what's going on in life sciences. As IT leader, AI is their board level discussion. So walk me through, how was it when you came in? With all of these questions around what's going on in the market, what's going on with AI, how did you break it down as a global CIO to saying, okay, this is kind of how you should go down this transformation journey?
I think maybe one of the things that's very unique about being a CIO or in IT in particular is you're the only function that really touches every other part of the business in such a deep way that you have to deal with the world the way it is, not the way you wish it was. And you can never predict or anticipate how it's going to be. So when I came into Amneal, as an example, we had a merger. We had three different, I'll call it legacy IT organizations that were trying to work together. And, most of them kind of didn't think the other one was right, that they were right. And, my first mission was nothing technical. It was very human in that I had to get people to understand. And the phrase I used at that point is, it's not about me, it's about we. And I just kind of made that up on the spot. And then I realized, actually, if you, the only difference between them is you've got to turn the M upside down and the me becomes a we. And it looks easier visually than it is, but that was the first job. And then I think once you're a we, getting a shared mission um, is the next thing. And then you let people do their thing.
As you can imagine, with 2023 and ChatGPT coming in, AI has been a board level discussion. I'm sure you're being asked about what are we doing about AI and
Yeah.
stuff. So walk me through how was that journey in 23 where it was all coming and you were asked lots of questions, but and walk me through to 26 where you have a program and you have the constructs of how you should be doing AI at scale.
Actually, January 23 is when I first had my text message exchange with our CEO, and he said, "What are we doing about AI?" And I had no idea what we were doing about AI. And so, again, I have no problem telling the truth. So my answer was, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. And I think the first thing I realized for myself was I didn't know a lot about AI. And the second thing I realized was nobody else knew a lot about AI either. So starting by educating ourselves was the first step that seemed to make sense. And you educate yourself by exploring. Right? So we started talking to a lot of people, understanding what they thought AI was, what they were doing, what they could offer, vendors, software providers. And so educate and explore became part of our methodology. And when we did that, we said, there's some nice things here that we should try. So we said experiment had to be the next step. Right? So of all the things that we tried, and I would say 80% of them were hokey. We took those few and we said, let's experiment and see what works or what doesn't work. And so we did a few experiments and some didn't work and some did work. And so I explained this to someone and thought it was silly, but now in retrospect, it doesn't seem that silly. I call it the triple E strategy: educate, explore, evaluate. And now we've added another E to that, which is expand. Because once you evaluate and something works, you better expand it as fast as you can. So I'll pause there for a second, and if you have any follow up.
No. That's I'm a triple E major, but it's electrical engineering from India. So when I saw all the E's, I was making that acronym that I was going to hit triple E. Now you have 5 E's,
Yeah.
and it has all the constructs. But let's get to the scale play because that's where people want to see. And as you went through this journey, what were 2 or 3 things you said, okay, these are ready to scale? And give me concrete examples. Is it commercial better than clinical, or did you pick manufacturing, or did you do
Yes.
a particular horizontal data for stuff so that it'd be good for people to know,
Yeah.
how do you boil the ocean, but how do you then get concrete next steps to build upon?
Yeah, I think the very first thing we did was say we need someone in the business to partner with. And so we appointed champions for AI in each function, in each geography, some willingly, some unwillingly, and some unwittingly, right? And so that gave us a point of engagement with the business to understand what they knew and how they were thinking about it. Because some cases, no matter how good the opportunity is, if the horse isn't ready to drink water, you can't make it drink. And so just knowing that was information. Having those people and then educating them was the next big step. So we didn't go in and start dreaming about what we could do with clinical development or regulatory or manufacturing or IT or finance. We didn't. I have never been a shiny tool type of person. So I wasn't going out there looking for tools to do something with. I always know you have to understand the business, what constitutes value. And so, our hypotheses at that point were just a simple LLM would be a ton of value for everybody. And even everybody couldn't use that LLM and probably still can't 3 years later to effective advantage. So we started training people. We tried some things and we got some trainers and they weren't very good trainers. So we threw them out and we got other trainers. And so again, through that process of exploration, we found people who are really good teachers. And we made it hands-on. So people talk about hackathons, people talk about promptathons. We didn't call it a promptathon, but essentially what we did, and we did it in small groups of people, 20, and we would take a bit of risk and say, hey, what's your work? And I'd say, well, I'm in R&D and I do tech transfer to manufacturing. Okay, wonderful. What's the problem you're dealing with right now? They'd be like, well, we got this new FDA guidance on how we need to make our inhaler product. It needs some additional studies and we need to factor that into the manufacturing process. Okay. Upload your guidance from FDA and ask it, what analytical studies do we need to do to meet this new FDA guidance? And wow. I mean, the light bulb was like the eyes went wide open. And because there were 19, 20 other people watching, they were like, wow, what can I do? And then everybody opens up and they talk about whether they're analyzing batch records or whether they're writing a job description or an SOW or an SOP or a BCP. They all started thinking, wow, I can do this. And we didn't anticipate this happening, but it happened. The people who knew this new thing, they wanted to show off. So they went off and showed it off to their colleagues. And I think it went viral. The result of that was in May of 2025, actually, when we started doing this style of training, we had 10,000 approximately interactions per month with AI.
Wow.
In February of this year, we had over 500,000.
Wow.
10,000 to 500,000 in 9 months. That's 45 times, 45x growth.
No, that's fantastic. And that immediately the CFO and me says, "Oh my God, your token costs are going through the roof, and what are you going to do to manage it out?" And we should handle the ROI and the cost part of it. But that's fantastic adoption
But
because
no, this is
the more
actually,
people, yeah.
sorry, finish your thought.
No. Go ahead. It's a good place to explore. Go ahead, please.
So this was a conscious thought from the beginning is ROI. When I worked at the big companies with the big bucks, people thought in millions before they actually asked for approval, right? We're an affordable medicines manufacturer. It was a whole mindset shift I had to go through when I came here 6 years ago. So we think about money from the start. And my default position is I don't want to spend any money. Because you know what? Who's going to make your $5 medicine happen if I go out and keep spending money like a drunken sailor? So we actually looked at ChatGPT Enterprise, but we didn't buy it because it's too expensive. And we said, for the moment, we'll just use ChatGPT Plus, I think it's called, right? And we will turn off data control so there's no training. And for the number of people who could use it, came through us, they got the training, they got the caveats, and they went ahead and used it. And we still said, don't put anything really secure in there. Whatever works for cybersecurity works here too. Don't put any PII, don't put any confidential information, don't put any, respect copyrights. And so we didn't spend really anything, right, except on the training. And, the POCs we did were free because even the people who were doing the POCs with us weren't sure they would work. They were just selling something. We really didn't, this explosion, why it happened in May of 2025 is because at the beginning of that year, Microsoft made Copilot free. Actually, I shouldn't say that. They made Copilot good enough, and it was free. And I'm not talking about M365 Copilot. This used to be called Bing Chat Enterprise. It was terrible. They molded it in Copilot, still confused between consumer Copilot and enterprise Copilot, but it was free. So we actually exposed that to everybody, and that at zero cost went like this. And there were some snobs who said, oh, it's not as good as ChatGPT, and they were right. But the vast majority of people at that point weren't using it for something very sophisticated. They were just learning how to use the tool. So why spend money on a tool that they're starting to learn to use?
Learn to
So it was
use.
free, pretty much. Even now, I think our LLM costs are negligible compared to others because A, we don't give it to everybody unless they show us that they want to use, they know how to use it and they're going to use it to good effect. We're a little bit more free now, right? Because we think people are using it to good effect. B, we have our own platform so that, we're not paying, per user per month prices. We're paying on a token basis. And frankly, even with that, it's negligible, right? We are not exploding. I probably use more tokens on a daily basis using the front end than most of our processes. I probably use 200,000 tokens a day.
What you've done is a kind of a groundswell way of getting adoption, which is fantastic. That's key part of change management, right? Teach somebody how to fish and they start to really make a good meal, right? But from an enterprise standpoint, you want to have some big areas in which you want to make a big improvement. I remember when I met you a long time back, you had put the core infrastructure systems, the SAPs and the guardrails of how to run the business. But now you have these transactional systems. Are there some big programs you're looking at to apply AI, so that you can get not just the incremental ROI of them using it, but transformational ROI for?
Yeah. So, that was one of those conversations I was having right before here, which is why I thought that the DNA name was curious because similar DNA thinks very differently about the same thing. What is transformational to one person is not to another, and it goes on forever. I'll tell you in my book what becomes transformational. Transformational is defined by the degree of benefit you get, right? Not how sexy the idea is, but the benefit you get. So if we can cut our, I'll call it, formulation to filing time by 50%, that's great. And have we done that? I can't tell you measurably that we can, but I know that just using simple research tools, scientific research tools, our scientists tell us that, some things they can cut 90% off the time, some places they cut 30% off, but they come and thank me. By the way, Copilot training, after we delivered it, it's the first time in my career, which is 30 plus years, that people would stop me in the hallway and say thank you. Mhm. So R&D is, by the way, I think the biggest opportunity for life sciences companies. That's not secret to anyone, but we knew that right from the start, and that's why we engaged the R&D people. And because it was touchable, it was within their reach, and they knew how to use it, right? Regulatory, same thing. Next step in the process, but assembling an ANDA, you can, I don't like the word automate because you can automate bad stuff, but you can make that process more intelligent. You can make that more fast. And so regulatory is another place where I think it's not transformation in the scientific sense, but in terms of cycle time acceleration, it is. Another area that sales and marketing we think is a huge opportunity, and our people there have done some amazing things with connected TV in terms of extending our reach to healthcare professionals and meet them where they are. So for Crexont, which is our most innovative product and newest product out there for Parkinson's, we have extended the reach in tremendous ways that we could not imagine before. And then again, we've used the basic tools to bring a lot of the agency work in-house and save money. At the same time as produce a better product because our marketing team used Perplexity to provide now personalized newsletters that incorporate healthcare professionals, key opinion leaders, and regional data and get it out there in an automated way. So if I went on transformational, for every function, it means something different. For IT, as an example, you can look for all the sophisticated things in the world, and again, people for automation, automation, automation. The biggest thing is making our brains much more productive by using AI. And so SDLC, System Development Lifecycle, I can show you places where we have spent probably $50,000 where a good prompter can do all of that in 20 minutes while making breakfast.
And you're touching upon a theme which actually I had a couple of white papers written about it, and which is the first part you really looked at after democratizing the teaching a person how to fish is using it for content creation, right? And all the use cases initially you hit upon where, hey, whenever you're generating content or you're doing research, use this. It's a low hanging fruit. Then you went after the second one, which is I call it automating anything you're doing with coding, because coding is absolutely ripe for transformation. And why do you need to write SQL when you can have Claude or ChatGPT write it for you in a much more better and structured manner? And so really looking at all aspects of coding, testing, and then bringing that portion along. Um, where are you seeing that journey evolve? What is the third use case after content creation and coding? Is it data and workflow, or where are you seeing this journey progress?
In a very abstract way, again, I'll pick on the word automate for a little bit, right? What we're doing with coding is, again, not automation, it's generation. So the journey, and there's some frameworks out there, and we're arguing about, not arguing, we're just building on each other's ideas, actually. I would say the first stage, right, is asking. That's what we were doing, but differently than we used to ask Google, right? We're asking it to do something for us, right? That's fairly easy to do, but it does it faster and better. The next is what I call assist, right? Assist means I need to do something. It's not that simple. For example, let's say I'm matching my IT staffing with my project portfolio. It's a mind-bending problem when you have hundreds of resources, you have hundreds of projects, and you have to match them so that you don't over-allocate people to something. Now it's assisting me in doing that, right? So it's ask, then assist. And I think the next step you can say is automate, but I don't like that word for the following reason: that A, people think when you can automate, you can get rid of humans or eliminate humans. And you can, right? You can, but it's not a one-dimensional thing. You may be elevating humans, not eliminating humans, to do something better and more value-added than something repetitive. So I don't use automate, I use the word adapt. Adapt is when you are rethinking, reimagining your business processes, either because you're going to change the way your current business is done, or you're going to think of new businesses you never thought about before because they weren't possible. But you're thinking about adjacencies, you're thinking about how you can leverage your core competencies in new ways. So you're really adapting your way of business to the new world enabled by AI.
Yeah, no, those are really good ways in which people can, like a crawl, walk, run. But I think it all starts with the first part, which you said, which is to democratize the access to the tool and getting people on board with it. Because without that, it becomes a resistance and adoption. Walk me through. I know for sure all of this is not a bed of roses. You would have had some reticent people who were like, "Oh my God, this is not going to happen in my watch," or "I'm better than AI." So walk me through some naysayers and how did you make them convert?
I'll have to disguise this example, but this example sticks in my head because it's such a big missed opportunity. Um, I'll call it opportunity X with machine learning. Somebody had been doing this action using tools, using data for years, right? And they were X% accurate. And we said, can we improve that accuracy with machine learning? And so we gave our machine learning partner 3 years worth of data from the past. We said, we know what the actuals are. Why don't you take this and build a model and they trained their model on 2.5 years worth of data, and then they had to predict the next 6 months. And let's see how close you come to the actual versus what we had forecast. And they did it. And they were pretty close. They were closer to than we were. And yet the person who looked at that, who had been doing this for a living, said, it's just about as good as my thing. So why do I need this? And in reality, what they didn't realize was the effort that went into doing that machine learning model was negligible compared to the effort that they went into doing it by a human. But so we didn't do it. We did not do it. 3 years later, we came back because somebody else said, why aren't we using this for this? And why aren't we using AI for this? And we went in and said, okay, let's look at it again. And 3 years later, I discovered that the metric for accuracy they were using was so flawed. They would consider themselves 100% accurate if they were between plus minus 25% of the actual. Okay?
Wow.
So they give themselves a 50% range, right, to be right.
Right. Wow. That's almost like a flip of the coin.
Yeah. So he said, no, let's look at, I don't even remember what the acronym stands for, but SMAP, mean absolute error percentage or something like that, right? And when you looked at that, the machine learning model was about 10% better. Guess what? The same person is now looking at it closely. So it's, sometimes like the old saying of you can take a horse to water, you can't make them drink. It's true. And people are going to realize this or adopt this in their own time. People would misunderstand it, adopt it to do the wrong things. It's a matter of, that's human evolution, again, DNA, right?
Yeah.
We all evolve at different rates.
So let's explore that DNA part, because we all evolve in different places and it's different strokes for different people. But as a CIO, you're asked to put governance in play. So you got to fit the governance. So what are the guardrails you're trying to put from a governance standpoint? And then how do you let the different DNAs play within it? Because if you're too pedantic, then nobody adopts it. If you're too loose, then everybody's a wild west. So, so walk me through that thinking on how you putting the guardrails while adopting this life sciences DNA.
So they're technical guardrails, and then they're educational guardrails, right? And then they're monitoring and control guardrails. We were not of the lock it down mentality, right? We said, let people experiment as long as we can see what they're doing, and not what they're doing, but if they're doing anything dangerous or not, we're fine. And we came up with a policy, which was very thorough. And if you read it, you would think that basically it couldn't do anything. On the other hand, when you really read it and understood it, it was pointing out a few basic principles. So I don't know why, but I used AI to do this. I came up with an acronym so people could understand it. The guardrails. So we said our policy in a memorable form is AI wise. 2 words, AI wise. Means use AI wisely, right? But each letter stood for something. The first A stood for approval. You can't use any tools without our approval, right? The second I stood for intellectual property. You have to respect that, and you can't just steal people's intellectual property. The W stood for watermark. When you produce something using AI, you have to disclose that you used it producing AI. The second I was for information security. Don't put anything confidential into an AI tool without really understanding what you're doing. The S. The S was the most important one. It stood for scrutinize. At the end of the day, the human is responsible for the end product, no matter how they produced it. So we said, you have to scrutinize the output that comes from an AI tool. You're responsible for it. The last E was for anything that goes external to the company needs to be pre-reviewed by the appropriate body, whether it's promotional materials or anything else.
No, this is fantastic. AI wise, I'm going to definitely, it's very memorable because you have to wisely use AI, but each of them have some very strict guidelines. And these are very appropriate guidelines. It's not something which you should do it if you're an employee of any company. You got to protect the best interests of the organization. So, and when you shared it with a formal training of this, or was it a policy paper, or did you call those business champions and ask them to be the kind of the super user to take it to their community? How did you make this thing?
Multiple ways, right? The first thing was we included it in that training that I referred to earlier, right? It started with a general understanding of, hey, what is AI and what it's not? What is AI good for? What it's not? And I think one of the nice phrases that came out of those trainings were, you use AI to assist you in what you're doing, not to abdicate responsibility. And that AI wise kind of got embedded in there. Then we have, global leaders meetings, and we would always, probably not always, for the past 3 years, we've had AI sessions, right? Where are we? What should we do? What should we not do? What are we doing? And rolling out AI wise there was, again, because it was easy to remember, people remembered it. And then periodically we just do broadcasts internally, just reminding people, hey, you shouldn't be using this. It's very interesting. One day our chief security officer came to us and said, Vikram, we have unauthorized use in blah, blah, blah location. Somebody's accessing NA10. And frankly, at that point, I had no idea what NA10 was. And he says, it's some German place. And I said, okay, let's go look at it. So we tracked down the user and asked them. It's one of these low code, no code process automation tools. It's a pretty good one, but we didn't know at the time. And so we shut it down at the time and just taught that guy a lesson, because when you have to speak to the chief information security officer, it's usually not a pleasant experience. So that kind of thing helps.
No, but it's a push and push like that. Over time, you would then evaluate NA10 to see if that's
Yeah.
something you want to adopt into your stack or not, and then bring it up. But without permission or without detection, then it's a Wild West
Yeah.
going on. So Vikram, as you build these things out, one of the things which you really told was this model as an IT leader to go from this need to we to wow. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what that is and how that is embodying and helping you in this AI transformation journey?
It's actually nothing that came because of AI, right? It came because we are scaling as an organization to be larger. And one of the tactics to manage scale is that you can't be everywhere at once. So you have to figure out some other way for it to happen, for things to go right without your being there. And, it made me think about how to communicate this to my leaders. Everybody typically gets ahead because they have some subject matter expertise and they're good at something. So that's the me stage. And indeed, that's what you get hired out of school to do, something because you have a good brain and you know how to do something. That's a hard skill, right? And if you're really good at it, then they assume you must be good enough for management or leadership. So they give you a team, right? But we all know that not everybody is a good team leader. Nor does everybody like leading a team. And so, as I've been thinking about the progression throughout my career, the we part is also fairly easy because, if you're a fairly affable person and you understand and care for other people, even without any formal training, you can actually build a team that's united, focused on mission, motivated, and go get it. If they got the subject matter expertise and you work well as a team, you go and do it. The next stage is harder because now subject matter expertise actually doesn't matter at all, right? Yes, you need it to evaluate what people are doing, just like you need it to evaluate what comes out of AI. But what you need to succeed is something totally different, which is you need to create ways of working that are repeatable, reliable, predictable, and don't depend on you. And I honestly just happened upon that as I was talking to someone, and I say, you need to set up a way of working. Because I like acronyms, and if you talk to anyone, they will make fun of me for it. So, well, if you do that, it's going to feel like, wow. So it became an acronym that was a way of remembering that at a certain level, you need to create ways of working that don't depend on you. And if you do get wow. but it is harder than you think because, again, self-awareness is something you're taught all along the way. Be self-aware. Some people are never self-aware, but it's important. To get to this point, that self-awareness goes to like a triple level, right? Because you have to remember you're not there for subject matter expertise. You are there to make sure that there are ways of working that get you to the right answer, lower the risk, get it done timely. And so that's how the me, we, wow progression
Yeah.
of career, I'll call it, expansion and evolution works.
Yeah. So Vikram, the reason I brought it up is as you look at the future, there's going to be a mixed workforce of AI teammates and humans working together. As you said, adapting. Now it's not replacing, but adapting. And so, how do you see this thing play as leaders? What is the wow in that new world where your workforce is not 10 human beings, but it's seven amplified by another 70 agents, which are making the seven Supermen, or Superman or Superwoman.
Honestly, I don't think it's that different than it is today, right? I'll give you an example of, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, SOX compliance. People are supposed to be doing what they're supposed to be doing, but somebody comes in and audits that they're doing it. That's called a control, right? And before the external control is an internal control. So if whether your worker is human or AI, you have to realize both of them make mistakes. Okay. And so you need to have controls in place, maybe different controls, maybe sometimes more automated, sometimes not. But I don't think it matters. You need automated controls, preferably in either case, whether your workers are human or not. So again, the concept of creating a way of working will include controls. It's process. It's a swim lane diagram of who does what, when, what's the input, what's the output, what's the control. So I don't think it actually changes that need, that imperative to have a way of working, even when you've got a mixed workforce.
Yeah, but I think you hit upon a good play, which is if once and I've worked in consulting in the SOX area, so you have the first line, second line, and third line, which means you have to build organizations similarly, right? The first line you do the controls yourself, the second line is quality, and somebody comes and tells you. The third line is audit, the fourth is the external, and so as you start to go and build this thing out, in addition to the AI governance of being AI wise, you need to build a control infrastructure. And to monitor that control infrastructure, as you said, the
Mm.
process to monitor AI would be different from the human, but it is to bring that infrastructure in play, which I don't think people have started to think about. They've thought about AI governance separately, people governance separately, but I think you brought a good concept here where you bring in a control framework, but implement it to a joint workforce.
I'm not sure if this is what you're really thinking about, Srivatsan, but I think this is, as you said, a very sophisticated thing that I think few people are thinking about. I think about it very, very simply. So we don't want to just have 1,000 tools blooming out there, right? So how do you control that? Um, and the control for that is very human. It's engagement with the business to make sure that, you know, people aren't doing things because they're unsupported or they don't know who to go to. So your operating model, being out there is very important. But let's say you do all of that, right? And you've got, 100 beautiful tools for across the business, and these are AI things. We have thought about it this way. Number one, we want to have a single point of access because we can't control multiple points of access efficiently, right? Imagine just even a plot of land, right? If you've got 5 gates, you got 5 times the number of security guards. You got 1 gate, 1 security guard. So we are going to route all access, whether it's to Claude, whether it's to ChatGPT, whether it's to some custom tool, through a single platform. So user access control tied into HR systems and IAM systems works, right? And that's regardless of whether it's AI or not. It's just with AI, the number of tools explosion is crazy. So you really have to, this force multiplier, this is a force multiplier manager, right? The second point is you have to restrict who can access what, right? And a lot of people, I don't think, understand or explain this, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it. You'll tell me I am. But AI is nothing but a predictor. It's a prediction tool, whether it's language or whether it's numbers. It's a prediction-based tool. Predictions only work if you have patterns of data. And patterns of data only exist if people are very careful about the taxonomy that they use to call different things, label different things in their data environment. So we have come up with a role-based access control is a very old concept, but I think we have taken a leap forward in educating people about how role-based access control works, and that why business domains and business data domains need to be explicitly named, because without that, AI cannot predict what it can or cannot access. Not that you would leave it to that, but people change over time. When you get the next person in to manage your AI infrastructure environment, how are they going to understand anything if there isn't a naming convention, a taxonomy for how data spaces are named, how agent spaces are named, and so on and so forth? So, tying it back to your question, um, this it's not really me, we, wow, but the notion of different layers of control, technical controls, human controls, um, quality controls, and audit controls, uh, they're still going to be required. They're just going to each use different tools, hopefully better and more efficient tools, to do their job. Every step in that process is going to be difficult, whether you're using tools or humans, if you're not following repeatable patterns of everything: process, people, nomenclature.
The thing which you said, which again resonated with me, is if you treat a control infrastructure as a framework, and then you start to put control infrastructure for the AI, then you have to define what roles AI has to play, what data it can access, what kind of inference it can do. And it fits that pattern. And that's why I was just trying to say that using a control framework and then exploring that from an AI governance standpoint seems like very
Yeah.
practical to
One
do.
of the things that I found most people are not abstract thinkers, so they don't understand frameworks, but they understand patterns. Naturally, people understand patterns, and frameworks are based on patterns. So if you can show them a framework and then show a pattern that the framework applies to, they tend to get it pretty easily. And so frankly, we have a lot more to do there in terms of educating our business partners. I call it data literacy, but it's probably a better word for it. I try to leave the word strategy and framework out of everything I say.
So we could continue to talk for a long time. So one final question: you've seen the pace of change happen, and if we are here, before I used to ask my guests 3 years from now, the world is changing so fast. So let's say I have you here back again in a year's time. Where do you see all of this going? What is going to be the impact? How's the world going to look like?
Let's see, where are we? In April 2026, April 2027. I think we'll know whether Claude won or OpenAI won, because I think we're at that place where, um, you know, Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, iOS, um, maybe they'll both survive like Android and iOS have. Maybe they'll both survive, but I think everything else will just be an also ran, right? Um, I think we will all have learned that um, as much as things have changed and gotten faster, um, things will actually not be that different than they are today. So the fact that you're seeing a new release from Anthropic every day is um, it's great that they're turning it out, but the ability of humans to absorb that kind of change in a way that meaningfully impacts their life with every little release is not going to happen. Right now, things are being released at the rate, if I were to go back 20 years, Microsoft Word, Excel, they have so many features in them that people never use, right? But back then, they were probably saying, "Hey, did you know you can bold with Word? You can draw a table in Word now. You can do italics, et cetera, right? You can embed an object." People take it for granted now. I think people would take this kind of thing for granted in a year. And I do hope that it leads to some transformational things in terms of the speed with which goodness gets delivered to the world, right? At a more affordable price. My message to software vendors and many vendors to whom AI applies is I expect a 30% discount in price, right? But you really think about that. Number one, what will that do to the GDP of the world if that were true? The second thing I wonder about, which I don't have an answer to, but maybe one of your future guests can answer it, is if we keep innovating like this to the point where humans are replaced, right? Then what will humans do, and will that be good for the world?
Those are big, broad questions. And maybe I'd like to have your final thought for the kids who are just graduating today and getting into this world. What would your advice be, and what should they be learning? What should they be doing so that they can really get ready for this new world?
My advice would never be on the technical side, Srivatsan. My advice would be the same as it would have been advising somebody coming out of school 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. Be curious, um, take chances, not risks, take chances as in you don't have to overthink everything. Just go out and do as many things as you can until you figure out what you love doing. And once you find it, which I was lucky to do, I really found it out of financial necessity, going paying my way through college. I trained as an engineer and never worked as an engineer. I worked in a very adjacent space. And, you'll be fine. Be curious, care about other people, and you'll be fine as long as you do that.
No, that's wonderful. Vikram, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation, and so many frameworks, the 5Es, the AIYs, and many more. But I think I learned a lot, so really appreciate
It was a lot
you
of fun,
spending time with us.
Srivatsan. Thank you for setting this up. Cheers.
Well, I'm not going to get all of Vikram's E's probably lined up, but it was interesting to hear how a company explored, evaluated, and expanded its use of AI. What did you think?
Vikram is a very practical and pragmatic leader, and he is bringing a very thoughtful and uh, fair approach to how do you go about doing it. Right, his 5Es is: first, you educate the community, then allow them to explore, then make them sure that they're experimenting, and when they experiment, you can evaluate whether the use cases are resulting in good outcomes, and then you then expand that for other opportunities. It's such a really nice way of thinking about how you could bring AI adoption to people. So I call it the 5Es, and it's really very pertinent to anybody who's going down the AI scale journey.
And he talked about something on the order of going from 10,000 to 500,000 K uses in 9 months. What did you think about the way he went about exposing staff to various AI tools?
What I really liked about his approach was he really helped teach people how to fish rather than give them a fish a day. And I think that's a really pragmatic way of how you approach AI transformation. Because if you can give people the tools, but also teach them how to use them, then the sky is the limit on what kind of adoption they're going to have personally, but the multiplication factor around all the different use cases they can do and how they can collaborate. I really like this notion of the promptathon, which he ran, where they're really bringing small groups of people and discussing what would go on in their day-to-day jobs, and then literally using the co-pilots to help them figure out what they should be doing. And this just not alone democratizes how you're going to be using it, but then immediately everybody else is thinking about the same use case, but from their perspective. So I really like this practical and pragmatic approach of giving somebody how to fish rather than giving them a fish a day.
And there was a very practical sense to how he had to approach things given, here's a guy with big pharma background who now is in an organization that doesn't have the luxury of those budget lines that are $1 million. How did you think about the way he went about controlling cost and ensuring an ROI?
Again, really looking at ROI from the get-go. He said that, you're not looking at financials later on. But he also thought about, okay, if I'm going to give this to everybody, what is the right model to give? How do I then manage that model usage? And really, he was measuring and monitoring that in a control infrastructure. So it was a very practical way of giving people the tools, but making sure that he had the right governance and control to ensure that he was not busting any budgets as he was trying to do that.
Yeah, that stood out to me, the way he talked about ways of working and putting different controls into place. He talked about that kind of central access point as being one of the important controls there. What did you make of that?
What happens when you have empowerment is everybody then starts to do pilots, and everybody has like a wild west of their own version of what they think good looks like. And lo and behold, you look at across the board and you're now dealing with so many variations and deviations. And so what he said is they set up a very good AI governance. So you have to, of course, ask permission before you can use it. And you have a controlled way in which you're bringing things together. And the access to these tools goes through his single access control as well as the HR system. So what he's doing is to make sure that there's only one front door. You all can come in, but you got to take your step, and he knows who's coming in and out, which is a brilliant strategy versus saying, okay, you guys can do whatever you want, and then then come and start to put a fence. That's never going to happen. So what he did was he built a control framework, told what the door was, and then allowed everybody to come in. Now, as they experiment, they're still within the boundaries of the walls of what he's put together.
Well, I thought it was a great session and really giving insights to how a company that's rolling out AI really thinks about making it useful and practical. But Sri, thanks as always.
Thank you.
Thanks again to our sponsor, Agilisium Labs. Life Sciences DNA is a bi-monthly podcast produced by the Levine Media Group with production support from Fullview Media. Be sure to follow us on your preferred podcast platform. Music for this podcast is provided courtesy of the Jonah Levine Collective. We'd love to hear from you. Pop us a note at danny@levinemediagroup.com. For Life Sciences DNA, I'm Daniel Levine. Thanks for joining us.